What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel. We are recording on Skype, so it's a little bit different. And on today's podcast, I am interviewing Pete Carcia. Pete, I forgot to double check and make sure that is the pronunciation before we went live. Hopefully that was correct.
That was actually correct. The
Okay.
fact that you did not say Garcia is better than about 60% of the population. So I give you a lot of credit.
I'll give myself a pat on the back there. So I was happy for that. Okay. So yeah. So again, I'm not going to do my usual welcome spiel here. So hopefully you're doing well. And I think we're just going to jump right into the podcast. Any last questions or anything like that?
I think that should do it. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. Let's go. I'd like to welcome on Pete Carcia from the Between the Sticks podcast. Pete, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
Thank you very much. I'm very excited about being here. This is my first interview. We're on the interviewer, I guess, or interviewee, I should say. So this is a bit of an exciting, momentous occasion, I guess. We'll go with that. Right.
I'm happy to be a part of it, man. We're excited. And so let's get to know you a little bit more. So I know we were on your podcast, Christian, Matt, and I, but again, this is the first time we're having you on this podcast. So can you tell us where you're from and kind of how you got into the sport of soccer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Enfield, Connecticut, which is basically right on the border between Massachusetts and Connecticut. It's, it's kind of a city light type of scenario, 45,000 person population, just to get an idea of where exactly it is, right off the Connecticut River. And, for me, in terms of getting into soccer, one of those people that kind of played in the youth years. I think I was about 4 or 5 years old when I was playing just in youth rec soccer. And basically that one guy that was very, very dirty player archetype. So, like a young Sergio Ramos, I had to be told constantly to quit pushing people, and things just sort of waned after that. But circa 2010 World Cup in South Africa, that comes along. That was all watched in Spanish, mind you, because we are a family that was kind of a little too thrifty to want to pay $100 a month for cable. So basically we were watching all of the World Cup on Telemundo, or I was not necessarily the rest of the family, and just got really into the sport and really into the fact of here's this sport that isn't necessarily the United States is the do-all, end-all, the best out of any country. There's a little bit of competition involved. It's not like the basketball or the American football or anything like that where, it's just one country that roots for it, maybe one and a half, and everybody else is just sort of there for the ride. So it was kind of interesting to watch that whole thing go down. Obviously, that was Landon Donovan, one of his breakout World Cups, and just got really into it. And from that point on, got more into leagues. I think like the 12-13 season was my first year where I got really into the Premier League or whatever that one. That was QPR and Reading that went down. I forget the exact year that was. I think it was 12-13. And then MLS shortly thereafter. And, as time went on, just got to be a ultimate stan of the game. That's basically how it goes.
All right. I love it. And so was there anything specific like in 2010, like why not 2006? I guess where were you at in your life that sort of like, made you super interested in 2010 for the World Cup?
I don't know. I mean, I remember watching little snippets of the 2006 World Cup. I don't remember any of the big memories or anything. I know the Czech Republic destroyed us somehow when they shouldn't have. And, I knew that Ghana was sort of the... Yeah. I remember watching that and thinking, really? Wow. All right. Well,
Jan Kohler, I remember. So that was one of the games. I was still in high school at the time, and me and some buddies, like we painted our chests and we got amped up, and like 20 of us went and watched at a friend's house, and just got absolutely shellacked, and that was very disappointing.
Yeah. So it was that, and I knew that Ghana was sort of the Achilles heel from the last World Cup, and it ended up being second time in a row. The reason that we were not going any further than, what was it, the round of 16 for the 2010. So, I knew little snippets about it, but I didn't really, it might have been just because we sucked because I was a kid. And, at that point I was at that stage in my life where, I come from a city that's majority Patriots fans. And that was the point in time where the Giants were running about 6-10 on average. I think it was right about that transition from Jim Fossil to Tom Coughlin. And at the same time, the Patriots were winning everything. It was just the start of the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era. So, as a little kid, I'm thinking, Dad, why can't we root for the other team without really understanding, how rooting for a team works? So, I think it probably was something to do with that. But, something about 2010, I don't know. I think I was that first moment where, since then I've really taken pride in being somebody that wants to learn about other cultures, wants to travel to different places. And the fact that it was really the first sporting event that was centered around, South Africa. So, a little bit of European influence in there, but just the African content as a whole, you normally don't see that in any sort of sporting events, whether it's the Olympics or any sort of world championships or anything like that. So I think there was a certain level of that piqued my interest. That sort of was the gateway drug, I guess, for entering into the game. So, once I understood that this was a sport that not only was, a fun sport to watch, but one that you could really bond with people in, I just sort of hit the ground running from there.
I love it. And so 12-13, you started to get into Premier League. So do you have a Premier League team that you follow?
West Ham United, which, I get judged a lot from friends of mine that are from Britain for the reason why. But basically, I was introduced to Monty Python at a very disturbingly young age. And I don't know, you might have to be a buff to remember this sketch, but the World Forum sketch, basically, where you've got Eric Idle, kind of in a Face the Nation QI format, where he's, the sketch is being set up where he's being interviewed by this whole panel. He's got people dressed up as Che Guevara, Mao Zedong, a couple other communist leaders from history. I know this is going to be fantastic if I start standing over AOC, the optics of that. But, the main reason was it was built up as a whole Face the Nation type deal. But all of a sudden, Eric Idle just steps up and goes, "And the first question is for you, Karl Marx. The Hammers. The Hammers is the nickname of what English football team?" And then it just sort of delves into this whole completely different quiz show, basically, like this whole game show with, famous communist leaders of our history. And, that was the whole premise of the sketch. And it just became like this big inside joke between my sister and I throughout the years. And then when I actually got into the sport, combination of finding out that West Ham United was an actual team that did some stuff, and also for whatever reason I felt this really weird inkling of interest in Andy Carroll for some random occurrence.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think that was about when he made the move from Newcastle to Liverpool, and then eventually he made the move to West Ham. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This is my team. I kind of like this.
All right, very cool. So how have you felt about them over the last few years? Because they've gone through a huge transition, out of why is their name escaping me? Upton Park. Yeah, out of Upton Park, yep. And then they're in the London Stadium. Yeah, and then now they're in the London Stadium, and they're trying to transition into a bigger club, but really just sort of ended up almost taking a step back instead of mid-table. How do you feel about their prospects, moving forward?
Well, I didn't really understand, as somebody kind of on the outside looking in, as a fan of the club, I didn't really understand the importance of why that move irked a lot of people that were longtime fans of the club until I actually was able to visit London last summer, and just seeing the juxtaposition in the locations of where the Boleyn Ground used to be and where the London Stadium is now. You go to the Upton Park stop on the Underground and you make your way back up. It is purely a working class area within London. It's right in the fabric of the city itself and the type of people that are around it. So, looking around and seeing, walking by where Upton Park used to be, and now that's being turned into some, what looks to be gentrified flats now, from what I could tell from the specs that they had on the, surrounding wall, blocking off the construction. Seeing that, and then now sort of the modern era, again, sort of gentrified Stratford area that was created, partly based on the London 2012 Olympics and that renovation and stuff. I understand how that can irk some people the wrong way, especially considering the fact that in terms of success, it hasn't been that much better. West Ham hasn't become, they haven't turned a Big Six into a Big Seven. They're still mid-table. They're not really, they still have the budget that doesn't really compete with a lot of other places. It's kind of like I hate to say MLS light because I don't want MLS to be completely defined by people going over the hill. So I'm just going to say J League light. where, you have the Fabianskis and the Zabalettas, the people that are sort of throwaways that have been with the Big Six for a number of years. And, they'll pick up and say, yeah, we'll take these guys under our wing and things like that. And, I do have a lot of hope with a lot of younger guys like Declan Rice coming in, but at the end of the day, the results are the things that matter in a lot of cases, and being able to make those big wins. And, as much as it's nice to be sort of the official C block of new stadiums from North London, 2 times in a row between the Emirates and New White Hart Lane, you want to compete a little bit more than that. So, it makes sense when it's not actually translating into any better results.
And so what do you want to see them do? Do you want to see them, because I mean, they're known as the Academy of Football, right? They've always had a very good youth academy dating back to the 1950s. Do you want to see them double down on that youth academy? Do you want them to be signing, players in the 20 to 24 range that are on the up and coming? Because I think it's tough to compete with, the Man Cities and Liverpools for West Ham right now, just being realistic. So what do you want to see from them to sort of challenge even the Leicesters and the Wolves,
Yeah, that's true. I think for me, what I'd like to see is, I think what you said, the movement of 20 to 24-year-olds getting into that market, especially when you have, some of the lower end Spanish clubs that, have some good players that are showing a lot of promise and things like that. I'd love to see them just sort of integrate themselves into the same kind of strategies that a lot of the top 6 are doing, getting into those 20, 24-year-olds and recognizing that, the budget isn't quite there yet. We're still talking $1 billion versus about 500, 600 million, if I remember the last Forbes valuations correctly. So, it's still a ways to go, but at the end of the day, as long as fans keep coming to the London Stadium, if they keep filling up 55,000 plus year by year, eventually we're going to catch up with those guys instead of, 30,000, however much the Upton Park place was at capacity. So it's my hope, at least, that they can just keep building revenue and keep building momentum. I think Pellegrini was a good choice as a manager. It sort of started off a little shaky, but in a lot of cases with a new environment, I think he was in the Chinese Super League was this last club, if I remember correctly. So, it's that transition back into the swing of things there. But, it's a promising ending to the season. I'm just hoping that they can find more people that, they can keep, like Declan Rice and things like that, and sign those younger guys that can show a lot of promise. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to compete with the Man Cities. But if you can get up there with the Chelseas and the Arsenals and things like that and compete for top 4, I think that can be really beneficial.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on the Pellegrini hire. I thought he was a fantastic hire, and I was proud of them for not making a rash decision with those early struggles, and I think that ultimately paid off for them. Do you think that they'll keep Declan Rice? You don't think that he's going to be angling for a big money move?
Well, I'm not exactly 100% confident. The reason I say that is just because there's a lot of shaky ground with what his intentions were choosing between Ireland and England, between what he was going to do for his national team. It was very Jonathan Lewis-ish, where you were thinking that he was going to go Ireland, that there was, I don't even think there was direct contact. I think he was second generation. So he was like right on the cusp of being eligible to be in the Irish national team. And there was a lot of talk that he would do that. And it sounded like he was going to that place. And then all of a sudden taking a U-turn after the 2018 World Cup, the intentions were sort of shaky for a lot of people as to why. So, if you have that sort of mindset as a player where you want to be in the best possible position, you can't expect the guy to be Jamie Vardy and be really gung-ho for one club. So, I just hope that whatever happens, it doesn't end up the same way like Payet does, where he's like forcibly getting his way out of the club. Obviously he's got a lot of talent. He's still young, which is fantastic, but we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Yeah. We don't get a lot of West Ham fans. So I really wanted to dig in there. So
I don't get that much either. So
yeah. So it's interesting to hear. Now on the U.S. soccer side of things, I don't know. I know at one point you were supporting New York City FC. I know that may not be the case anymore, you alluded to, but so can you talk about your fandom from an American club perspective?
So right about the time, sorry for the lack of eye contact here. I'm plugging myself in.
Yeah.
But around the time that I got into MLS. This was, I think, the 2013 season, roughly, the year that SKC beat RSL in the title game. I think that was 2013, but it was right about when they were discussing the addition of Orlando City and New York City FC into the league. I was of the point, I found out at a very early time that Red Bull wasn't exactly the noble group for the modern game. So I was really tailored to, as much as I'm a New York sports fan by default, wasn't really interested in them necessarily.
And not the Revs either?
No, I will not support anything Bob Kraft related. Not even because of the recent events either, just because I'm a hater. I'm a hater of Boston sports and their fans. If I ever become famous, I got to make sure all of my skeletons are already out of the closet before I start talking smack to Dave Portnoy, because not really. Not a big Boston sports fan guy, But we'll, it's not about being intolerant. I will say that for the Revs fans of the audience, it's just it's how I grew up. I grew up a New York sports fan, so you just sort of naturally you respect them, but you don't really care for it. And also, Revs fans, not the best in terms of ultras, in terms of their atmosphere, which is partly because of the stadium they're in. I'd like to see them in a proper soccer-specific stadium until I could actually judge, but we'll see. But any case, so I saw it was jointly owned by Manchester City and the Yankees, and I thought, oh well, this is a good environment to get myself into. David Villa, obviously, the 2010 World Cup, was my first real outing with the sport, so I knew who he was, and I'm thinking, wow, here's this guy from the beginning, moseying his way on in here, and then Pirlo, anybody Italian, that's my heritage, so I can respect any of that. So I was excited about where the club was going. It seemed like everything was coming together. In recent years, it just sucks because, the whole thing with Delme Torrent and whether or not he's a good manager, I can live with that. But just being in an environment where you kind of feel like you're the one Caucasian person in the audience that isn't a Proud Boy, I knew about all the background stuff that was going on with that. It was like 5 people that was in Charlottesville. They found themselves into supporter section games and things like that. Those people had been banned. Wasn't that big of a deal. HuffPost was about maybe 5 months late on that. I'm cool. It's fine. But seeing the pictures from the last DC United away match with some of the Spanish Nationalist Party supporters just rolling in with the Templados like it was nothing, it just.
So give me a little bit of background. So I'm familiar with the Proud Boys. I don't understand. So the last reference you made. So I'm not great with political stuff. So yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So basically what happened was there were some pictures that came out shortly after the most recent matchup with DC United and NYCFC at Audi Field, where alongside some of the supporters that went for an away day, there were a couple of people with flags from Spain that had different symbolism and things of a lot of the far-right groups within the country of Spain. So it was Spanish flags with certain symbolism that had that kind of stuff going on. And it looked like they had fit right into everything. Nobody really knew what the situation was, where they were taking pictures with the Templados, which is the Latinx supporters group for NYCFC. They were able to kind of infiltrate themselves in pretty well. And basically it was a situation where everybody was caught off guard, but at the same time, I just felt like I didn't want to be associated with this at all. I want to take my role as a straight white male seriously because, kind of the Patrick Stewart way of things. If I have more privilege, I want to use that for good. So,
yeah, it's completely understandable.
Yeah. So for me, I recognize that I don't live in the city. I don't have any sort of control over what happens in that environment. And if something were to go as haywire as that club and its supporters being, right up there with Zenit or one of those really racist clubs, I don't want to be a part of that. So for me, my focus right now in terms of soccer support is with Hartford Athletic, the new USL club coming in. We are starting off trash, 8 away games, 8 losses. but that's okay. It's Connecticut. We're used to it. I will support the team nonetheless. So I'm putting all my energy in that. The folks that are starting off the supporters groups there, 19th Regiment and 2nd Regiment, really nice guys. Ownership group is they've been really nice to me and been very welcoming, and we're just going to focus on that for the time being.
Awesome.
Until things kind of calm down.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool to hear. So, it's Hartford Athletic, right?
Yep.
And so this is their first season. Is it USL Championship or USL League One?
USL Championship.
Okay.
Yep.
So top division in USL, so second division. For people who may not know, second division in US soccer. There's no pro rel here yet, but so right now it's basically in the second division. And Hartford is it the biggest city in Connecticut?
Not by population. It's actually
Okay.
Bridgeport, but in terms of commerce and things like that, definitely Hartford is number one. But at the same time, it is still kind of the whistle stop between Boston and New York in a lot of ways. So, it's considered the insurance capital of the world. We have a lot of companies here: Travelers, Hartford Steam Boiler, the Hartford. A lot of insurance companies are here. Aetna, United Healthcare. So that's kind of the niche of the city, but in terms of size and everything, it's a very high tax area, high tax state, to be honest with you. So, it's not really built that much ground per se since the Great Recession. It's just sort of recovered, but not really gotten that much further than that.
Gotcha. And so with the club, obviously it's their first season. What's it like supporting a club kind of from the very beginning? I mean, I have it, from a union perspective, but, I'd love to hear your thoughts with Hartford.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, when it's a second division club, especially, and you don't really know where pro rel is going to end up with that. I think it's nice because this city is still very conscious of what happened with the Hartford Whalers and the fact that they had a forced move. In fact, the matchup last weekend between North Carolina FC, that was our last away game before our home opener this weekend against Charlotte Independence. Their supporters groups in NCFC did a whole Dead Whale Hockey Night, I guess it was called, where basically I think they ended up beating us 4-1, and after every goal that they scored, they started playing Brass Bonanza, which is sort of that's the little tune that they used to play for Hartford Whalers games whenever they scored a goal
that is
or
cold-blooded.
Yeah, there were a lot of triggered supporters of Hartford Athletic for that, needless to say. So it was starting off early, which, I like the banner. I can respect it, but, it'll be interesting to see how that goes further on down the road once we've sort of further established ourselves. But, it's good because it's something for the city of Hartford that, they've been struggling financially throughout, since the Great Recession. It's between that and the Yard Goats coming in. I think it's a great revenue stream. It has the great potential to be a nice addition to the city, especially in a place like Dillon Stadium, which I think is that area sort of right south of the center of the city. It's not as distressed as it was. It seems like there's more of sort of bluffs being created and things like that. So it's a bit more growth involved there.
So it's like up and coming.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a bit more up and coming, but it's a nice addition to that area of the city and just for the soccer scene in general. Because I think it's nice, Connecticut's soccer fandom is something that it's really an enigma. It's something that is definitely there. I mean, the New Haven market I know is consistently top 10 for percentage rates for Premier League matches and things like that. Providence too, even though technically that's not really considered part of Hartford, it's still within this region. The University of Connecticut, I was a former capo of UConn Goal Patrol, which was the supporters group, student run for UConn soccer men's and women's, and that has been over the last few years number one or number two for attendance rates for men's soccer.
Thank you for Andre Blake.
There we go. Andre Blake. Kyle Aaron, even though his departure out of MLS was quite an interesting one, but he's doing well with Besiktas right now. A lot of USL players that are recent UConn grads. We got Jacob Hauser-Ramsey and Scott Levine at Memphis. Abdu Baki John doing his thing in Louisville, fitting right in, which I love. So, it's nice that we have a pro team that we can root for now. We had Hartford City FC, which is an NPSL club, but, one that didn't make the cut for the NPSL pro movement there, and just one that sort of, for whatever reason, didn't get the momentum I think that maybe people were hoping for, that were big investors or, state leaders that were wanting to put things together for a pro club of some kind. And, which is unfortunate because those guys are definitely passionate fans. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I'm neutral about it. I hope both clubs do really well. I'd like to have some sort of inner city derby.
So the other club's still around, right? It just didn't get NPSL Pro, but it is still around.
Correct. Yeah, okay. It is still around. Hartford City FC is still kicking. I believe they made a move from the CCSU's Central Connecticut State University's soccer stadium, which is about maybe 10 miles south in New Britain. I think they made a move to the University of Hartford Stadium, so they're a little bit closer. But I guess they didn't have whatever revenue was required for NPSL Pro, or just didn't have. I honestly don't know the backstory. I shouldn't be quoting anybody on that, but for whatever reason, they're not on the list. But I think there's a group of about 20 or so people that are very gung-ho anti-Hartford Athletic, which that's totally their thing. But
yeah, you're going to get that with everything. I mean, yeah. So, and that's that's the issue with soccer in this country. Just there's so many soccer fans, but it's just so fractured. And that's the challenge that, I think we all have to deal with making, soccer content or being soccer fans. And it's like, all right, I'm a fan of, MLS. And so someone who's, generally a fan of lower divisions might have a problem with me being a fan of, MLS or all that stuff is just, we could go down a rabbit hole. So I've talked about it on podcast before, so we don't need to go too far down that.
Fair enough.
So you haven't, I guess, had a home match, because I was going to ask, like, what's the experience like? I guess maybe what are you looking forward to at the match? I don't know the size of Dillon Stadium. Do you have any idea, like, expected crowd?
Well, Dillon Stadium hasn't been fully completed yet. It's a full renovation from just being a, sort of a distressed football stadium that all the high schools would share. So it isn't completely finished. It's expected to be a 55,000 bleacher stadium. The only thing I don't like about it is that there's no bleachers on opposite ends of the goals. So the supporter section is basically going to be one half, whereas the family is going to, and, all those tickets are going to be on the other half, which isn't the best scenario in terms of environment, but is still nice because, you get sort of a little better of a view than most supporters groups. I'm completely fine with it. So the first few matches, I think until mid-July is what they're saying right now. But basically they're going to be at Rentschler Field, Pratt & Whitney Stadium at Rentschler Field, which is in East Hartford, maybe about 5 minutes to the east of the city itself. 45,000 or just 40,000 seat college football stadium for the University of Connecticut. I think last I heard there were at least 10,000 tickets sold, which I'm excited about. I'm sure a lot of USL clubs would kill for that kind of numbers, and the fact that we get that for a winless club after 8 games is mind-boggling and exciting for me. So, definitely if you're in the area this weekend, drop some tickets. It's only $10. You're not going to get that in a lot of professional clubs around here. So, I'm excited about that. I feel like there's a certain openness with a lot of the leadership within the club, within the club supporters, I should say, where a lot of ideas are being kicked around, where it's not just going to be the basic U.S. soccer chants and songs. There's a little bit of leeway I think that people are really excited about. So I like that. That's an environment that I hope for. There's certain traditions that UConn Goal Patrol have that I've wanted to get rid of that we're not going to be doing in Hartford Athletics ranks, which I'm excited for. I can sort of improvise a whole lot more, which is really nice. So, I'm excited for it, man. I'm really pumped. I think this is going to be at least a nice core group of supporters. It's all just going to be a matter of pulling a lot more people into the dark side and just letting things roll.
I love it. So last question on that front. How involved are you with the supporters? I mean, are you a capo? Are you leading chants? Are you just making recommendations? Like, what's your role within the supporters group?
So hoping for capo. I am quite a busy guy at the moment. I got a full-time job for, I'm only 6 months into the job, so I don't want to make too much of a precedent on anything else. And I'm also going back to school. I'm going to start taking some classes again because I guess I only have 39 more credits for another major. So I figure, why not? Let's go for it. So my involvement is going to be as best as I can. When I'm there, because of my previous experience with Yukon Gold Patrol, it sounds like I'm going to be one of the capos, which I'm pumped about. Definitely helping out with some of the chants and a little bit of the logistics of it. I'm more so the pump up guy, I guess. As it sounds.
Very cool. Awesome. So in addition to being a fan and all that, you also have a podcast, which we were fortunate to be on. So it's called Between the Sticks. And I believe you started it relatively recently. So why'd you start to do a podcast?
Yeah, so the original premise of Between the Sticks actually wasn't going to be the interview format. I met a couple of guys who were studying abroad at UConn when I was a junior there, both from the Midlands of England. One went to the University of Nottingham, one University of Lincoln. The two of them, best of friends from, secondary school onward. And basically they were also big fans of the game. One of them's a Villa supporter, the other Lincoln City, which is quite specific, but kind of timely considering they've had, 2 promotions in the past 3 years. So I kind of like it, being somebody who can sort of watch that a little bit more firsthand. So the original premise was actually going to be for us to keep in contact with each other. The first 2 episodes are really, really terrible audio, to be fair, but they were talking about the World Cup and some of the predictions that were coming from that. I recommend listening to it if you love people that completely wrote off Croatia. I think we talk about them for a total of about 45 seconds. So, it's a nice little piece for any big Croatia fans that want to, throw some hate out. So that was the original premise, but, things kind of got in the way. We all got busy with our lives. We all graduated and went our separate ways. We still keep in contact, but just not to the point where we could record a podcast together. So for me, what I wanted to turn it into was a forum for supporters and influencers of the game of any kind. I was really intrigued by the sort of political split that came from the Trinidad and Tobago match and the type of things that wanted to be addressed, things that probably won't be addressed as much as people hope for because of the voting of Carlos Cordero as U.S. soccer president, and just all the different intertwinings of U.S. soccer from club perspective, from the growth of the national teams and building academies and things like that. I mean, that whole thing just interested me so much. And I've always been sort of a politically savvy, for lack of a better term. I just had a lot of interest in sort of looking for just trying to understand different points of view and things like that. So I really wanted to turn that into something that I could make. And, I've been lucky. Like I said, I'm a busy person, so I've only had to release, 1 episode a month roughly. But I've been lucky to have had, big time MLS supporters like Christian Polanco of the Cooligans, who's, maybe views the pro rel movement as a bit more of a tin hat type of situation, or guys like you and your brothers that are in an MLS club that, frankly, I'm in that stage right now, considering NYCFC was my club, where kind of one of the first clubs in line to be worried if Pro-Well was initiated in U.S. soccer. So a little bit of that perspective. And, guys from Chattahooligans and Greenville Triumph, folks that are in sort of the lower league movement and things like that. And I've been, been blessed to be able to, talk to other people. I was able to visit the Copa 90 U.S. office before that all closed down and being able to meet all those guys, not have them on the podcast yet, but at least meet everybody and sort of get an understanding of all those different points of view. And, at the end of the day, for me, what I really want to do with it is put together something where I can build some sort of a good, Kyle Martino style, what's the word I'm looking for? Compromise. That's it. Compromise. Where
his plan that he put together when he was running for president, you mean?
Yeah. Something where, we can initiate pro-rel, make it a gradual thing. So, the setup isn't too much of a burden on, the clubs that maybe would have to cut a lot of revenue if they got relegated, or would have to gain a lot of revenue that they don't have if they get promoted. Making that a gradual process, and keeping the corporate side of things in mind. I really want to be able to put something together that can initiate all of those concerns necessarily. And it's all about just being able to get all of those perspectives, keep all of them in mind, and then being able to make the decision from there instead of, staying a tribal thing. For me, I'd love to see a situation where, Hartford Athletic and Hartford City are having a derby match in MLS. That would be an amazing experience to have something like that in such a major sport. Because, I've lived in Connecticut my whole life. This has always been the whistle stop. I was born before or directly after the move from Hartford Whalers to Carolina Hurricanes. So I don't know, outside of the national perspective of UConn basketball, it's not really, the city of Hartford itself has never really been a mecca for anything. So, I really want to have that right in my backyard to give that a shot, experience that. So we'll see how it goes. That being said, at the same time, I do understand that there is sort of the stress tests involved with MLS. Obviously, you've got the contracts that were put together to get into the league. Obviously, the ownership groups, they have their rights that, they put all this money in for clubs, especially considering the case that a lot of these people, like the Hunt family and, unfortunately the Crafts as well. I mean, they pretty much saved the entire league system at one point. So
and Schutz and Hunt saved the system. Kraft was there. So
he just had some cash to throw.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Kraft.
That sounds more like him. That definitely sounds a bit more like him, considering things with the Revs. But, understanding that there is that sort of legacy group that really shouldn't be completely tossed off to the side, considering, they were there when nobody was practically. So, it's sort of finding out this thing. I'd be interested to see what would happen if, say, MLS were to buy out USL some sort of way. I'm kind of playing around with ideas, but have, say, MLS be 30 teams, USL Championship be another 30, USL League One be another 30, and then kind of an NPSL Pro East and West from there, and kind of make your way down. Kind of work with something like that. Maybe some sort of league club licenses. So if you don't have a certain amount of revenue, if we don't have a soccer specific stadium or certain specs, you're not getting into a league that maybe you shouldn't, where that, say like AFC Wimbledon making it into the Premier League and being completely tossed out the water because, obviously they don't have a lot of cash to blow compared to other clubs, something like that. Because, you definitely want people to stay involved with a club, and, something where you have as many losses in an environment that just isn't your group necessarily revenue wise. So, I'm playing around with different ideas with that. And, as I talked to more and more people within the community, being able to build off of that and revise based on that. So, we're seeing where it goes. I'm open to anything right now. All I know is that I want to be somebody that throws up a soccer for America version of Green New Deal and see what happens. All
right. Very cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. And actually, so I don't know if you probably can't see the book behind me, but someone who we're going to have on the podcast in the not too distant future wrote a book similar to that. He calls it the Football Manifesto, but he's trying to put together a plan. Somebody else who we're going to have on the podcast, Daniel Workman, is also working on plans. Peter Wilt had a plan. Kyle Martino had a plan. And so it's an interesting time to just, again, I say this every week. Matt made fun of me on the podcast this weekend, but I mean, it's a fascinating time to be following soccer in this country. I'm gonna harp on it. And I think we're moving towards a place of pro-rel, whether it's including MLS or not. I think eventually it will include MLS, and I'm certainly not anti-pro-rel. I just think it needs to be very thought through and thought from the perspective of all parties involved. And so a lot of times, a lot of the pro rel people only think about, again, the people that aren't involved in MLS right now. But you also need to put together a plan that makes sense for MLS people as well. And so, again, I'm fascinated, whenever you put together your plan, or if I can help in any way, definitely let me know. And, I'd recommend reaching out to some of those people, and I'm sure they have thoughts on all that, as well. From a podcast perspective, I know you've only done about 10 or so episodes. Who's been the most?
8 episodes we've done. 2 were the aforementioned, just my buddies from England. So 6, I think, altogether of the interviews. And it's been interesting too. I think the juxtaposition between Cooligans, Christian Polanco was who I had on the show. I unfortunately didn't have both of them, which, Alexis is quite the enigma. That man, he's quite the character. I'd love to have a conversation with him at some point. But, having that conversation with somebody who's really invested in the game, really passionate to the point where, they're talking smack about Men in Blazers constantly just because they badmouth MLS, that perspective and the passion behind that whole environment, going between Christian and the folks from Chattahooligans that I had on, Andrew Bresci and Matt Caniglia, who were longtime supporters of Chattanooga FC, definitely people that, I think as a disclaimer, they didn't want me to have these two at the complete forefront of everything per se, but definitely, guys that have firsthand accounts of everything that's gone on with Chattanooga and, Red Wolves coming in and just sort of the fact that they had such a wonderful grassroots club and, the example really that should be set for every non-league club in America, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the way they've embedded themselves into the Chattanooga community has been fantastic. And just seeing that both perspectives work, there, in a lot of respects, there is no wrong answer in terms of league. It's all about how you integrate yourself in the community, how you get yourself involved with, different charity work and all that kind of stuff that goes on into building a club, not just to build a soccer club, but to build one that a lot of people can get behind. So, I think that's been the most interesting thing is, I thought that after listening to these guys, I'd have, one way or the other, but I really haven't. There's been a lot of good cases for many different perspectives of the game. And, I'd love to see a situation where the best of non-league are included in that whole league system. And, at the same time, there are a lot of MLS clubs that are doing a lot of things right. And, it's just that combination of things that all come together, really.
Absolutely. And so that what you touched on there is probably the thing that's most frustrating for me as a fan of soccer in this country is you have this club that's ingratiated in the community, that's really building something, and you have someone else who comes in who thinks they're smarter or thinks they can do it better, and then they start something from scratch, and then the two are just cannibalizing each other. That's the story of soccer in this country, and it's so damn frustrating as a fan of the sport in this country that...
Well, it could easily be a good thing, too. I mean, if we get a situation where there's, a core supporters of Red Wolves, those people that have been in Chattahooligans for the past 10 years are still doing a strong environment. If there's a situation where they can have a good budding rivalry, that's fantastic. That means more people can get involved in the thing. Here's such an intriguing story about U.S. soccer where it's this one city that people are coming side by side and going against each other for 2 weekends a year. That'd be a good thing. If we could make Chattanooga the next Manchester or, maybe it would be considered the next Madrid derby where it's, sort of more of a class by class situation. That would be great for the sport. But at the same time, you see a lot of situations where you don't really get that. I think that's why I think Hartford would be more of a good example of that, because there's a bit more of a gray area in that situation. The investors in Hartford are athletic. They've grew up in Connecticut their whole lives. They've invested in the city a whole bunch. They've already been embedded in. There just happens to be an NPSL club that gets 100, 200 people a game that is established. Kind of, they're definitely known within the community, and they get really defensive about their club when someone else comes in, in the same way that Chattanooga FC has. So, I'll be interested to see where that takes us. Both situations between Chattanooga and Hartford, but it's a total crapshoot at this point. But I think there's the opportunity for it to be a good move, but there also could be that thing where one develops the other, and it just sucks for the game, really.
Yeah, and obviously it would be awesome if it grows into a rivalry. And I'm not really talking about the Hartford example where, again, you have people that are invested in the community starting a club where they see there's a market opening. I want to talk about the frustration of, I mean, even the Philadelphia Union to an extent sort of just came I mean, it was fan supported, so the Union's probably a bad example. But I'm just talking about ownership groups that come barreling in, and there's already a huge soccer infrastructure set up from youth academies and things like that and youth clubs all throughout this country, and it's not ingratiating yourselves with those people or those fans, and that's where the frustration comes in. But who knows what's going to happen in the future. Again, it's an exciting time to be following all of this. Now, in addition to the podcast, do we want to talk about your Excel file and what you're trying to accomplish with that? Let's touch on it a little bit.
So I'm a bit of a statistics buff. I've been somebody who has kept track with a lot of sports statistics over the years and political statistics and things like that. I've got party swings in Congress and the House of Commons for some dumb reason, even though I have very little ties to the UK, things like that. And for me, I've really wanted to just sort of as a sociological project kind of understand the history of the 125 years that Europe has ingratiated soccer within their communities and their history. So what I've tried to do is basically different algorithms to understand what clubs have been the most successful within their country's ranks. So, for example, I showed you that I'd completed everything for league play in England's league. And basically, I have a system where the max amount of clubs that has been in top leagues, the top flight was 22. So I basically did a point system. First place that season gets 22, second place 21, increment on down, and added all that tally up, added in how many seasons they've been in Championship, League One, League Two, National League, and all their predecessors, and sort of gone from there. Quite the interesting experiment. All of you Liverpool fans out there, congratulations. You are the points leaders at the moment. Shouts to Bill Shankly and all those guys back in the day, the Dalglishes and everything. But, it's an interesting thought experiment because, everything was done manually to start. I'm still working on turning it into a bit easier algorithms. I am somebody that knows Excel, but not to the major point necessarily to sort of get anything better than pivot tables and things like that. So still working on that bit, but seeing just how that's changed over the years. A lot of people wouldn't know this if they didn't actually look it up, but Aston Villa was actually the points leader for the first 50 years or so because they had such a great start and stayed in top flight for so many years. And it's to the point now where I think there's about 4 clubs that's been in top flight in some way, shape, or form for more than 100 seasons in England. Villa's one of them, even though they're not involved in it right now. So it's just getting to understand sort of club history and things like that. It's been really intriguing to watch that. And, obviously you get places like Spain where it's Barcelona and Real Madrid just kind of bidding against each other and everybody else is like 500 points back at least. So, there's things like that, which, it's one of those things that I've had as a hobby that I've just sort of put together. And, I figured if there's some sort of way that we can utilize this in some sort of fashion, then I figure why not? Why not put it out into the world?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a really cool looking file. I know you shared it with me, and even the formatting of it is really awesome. But yeah, it's really cool, and hopefully you'll be. I don't know if you'll be sharing it, or so. Like, I guess, what do you, other than giving your own self sort of historical context information, do you plan on sharing it? Are you going to post it? Is it going to be interactive? I guess what are you hoping to do with all the data?
I'd like to build something out of it. The question is what exactly. I definitely, from a sociological perspective, I'd love to see where that puts soccer in the whole shape of things. Obviously the idea of the modern game where you have a couple of super clubs, country by country, kind of leading the way throughout all of history, basically. I think it's been an interesting scenario evaluating what exactly is the modern game to blame for that necessarily, or has history pretty much just repeated itself in a new form? Great example of that being Spain, where Barcelona and Real Madrid have been pretty much running the show since the 1930s. The amount of championships that they've won, the amount of La Liga championships, I should say, is, obviously far outweighs anybody else. And the same thing with, Scotland with Celtic and Rangers and, things like that. Whereas a situation with France where there's been a little bit more parity through the years, and you get one nice OPEC investor come in, take this random club in Paris and just sort of skyrocket it up over the most recent 10 years, seeing that kind of effect it has on the situation. So sort of evaluating a whole bunch of different things, and hopefully maybe making it into something good. I'd like to see if I can put something together, especially now, with going into a more liberal arts major instead of engineering school, being able to have that knowledge to put something together over the next couple of years, maybe make something of it. We'll see. It was something that I was just bored on a vacation one day that I put together a long time ago, I think before college even. So, I've just sort of kept with it, expanded it, and we'll see what we can make of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's very cool. And, whatever ends up coming of it, I'm happy to share and happy to take a look at it because, I find all that stuff fascinating as well. So before I ask my final question, is there anything we didn't talk about on the interview that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I'm obviously looking for a lot more people to interview for the podcast. I know I've tried to message people and, it hasn't really followed through. I know San Jose supporters, I think, is one of the groups that I was going to look up next. But if there's any way for me to plug, if y'all want to come on the show, if there's any sort of fans of a certain team, whether it be MLS, USL, NCAA, NWSL, I haven't had anybody specifically for the women's game yet. I'd love to get their perspective, especially with the Women's World Cup coming in. Anybody that's a part of the soccer community, no matter how big or small, love to hear from you. Love to hear your perspective on things because, like I said, I want Between the Sticks to be not a situation where it's specifically one way or the other. I want it to be an open forum of some kind where anybody, within reason, I don't want the Proud Boys of NYCFC or, some of the more questionable Antifa members of Cosmos, Not everybody in Cosmos is like that, but some of the more, sort of, I guess, insurgent archetype of New York Antifa. I wouldn't want any of those guys on, but anybody else, anybody that just loves the game for what it is and has some sort of American tie, I'd love to have you on the show.
Yeah, so we have Pete's Twitter account linked in the video description and podcast show notes, but in case anyone's just listening, Pete, where can they find you on Twitter?
So on Twitter, I am That Geek from JFK. It is a Twitter handle that I have not changed since freshman year of high school, so bear with me. That's my middle school. JFK was my middle school, and I just sort of stuck with it because I was too lazy to change it. But yeah, so you can find me there on Twitter. Instagram, I have a photography account at Pete Garcia Photo that I keep tabs with. Obviously, outside of whatever soccer events I can get hold of, it's not completely niche towards soccer. It's just sort of amateur photography, but I check that very often. So if that's easier, that's great. And the podcast also has an Instagram account at Between the Sticks Podcast. I don't check it as much though. It's just more to say that I have it, but yeah, anybody that wants to reach out, feel free.
All right, yeah, and we'll add those links to the podcast show notes as well in video description. So, Pete, I like to leave all my interview guests with this final question. What's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world?
Oh, man, that's an easy one. Just being able to have a professional soccer team right in your backyard is not a lot of people can say that they were there when a team first started. And what I'm hoping for in this environment, with Hartford Athletic coming in, I'm really excited about it. I just hope that it's the start of something fantastic like a New York Giants and not the start of some sort of fluke like, I don't know, Orlando Apollo's American or Alliance of American Football or whatever that league was, just sort of doing the best I can to try and grow the game, because this is the sport of soccer is such a cultural sport. It has allowed me to open my eyes up to the world. The only reason, it wasn't just my junior year meeting those two guys that were exchange students. I met all of the exchange people that were there from all over Europe and Australasia and a little bit of Asia. And, just being able to bond with them over soccer was such an amazing thing, and because of that, now I have all of these places that, I have spots to crash for free instead of having to pay for a, €300 a day hotel of some kind, or an Airbnb that's maybe half that. I got it for free. So just being able to open your eyes up to the world a little bit more through sport. It combines two of my biggest aspirations in life, is to, love the sports that I love, and travel to new and interesting places, and, being able to do that through the game of soccer is such a fantastic thing. And being able to say that, hey, it's now in my backyard, not as quote unquote amateur athletics of NCAA, which is frankly, we won't get into that. Or, having to drive down to New York or Boston, or, having to go for a non-league team. I mean, this is really something special that I think can be put together in a right way if everybody can. Obviously it's going to take a while for people to get behind it, especially to start success-wise, going 0-8, but it's something that can be fantastic. And I want to be a part of that growth, not only for the sport of the game, but for the state of Connecticut, because frankly, we get a bad rep. It sucks. I hate talking about it, but, just got to be part of that solution. My senior quote in high school was, there are two types of people in this world: the people that bitch about the problems of the world and those that go out and solve them. I want to be the latter. I want to be the person that goes out and solves them. And if the sport of soccer can be a part of that solution, I am more than down to be a part of that. So I'm hopeful, man. Despite Trump's America, I'm hopeful.
I love it, man. Well, that is fantastic to hear. I wish, Hartford Athletic all the best. Hopefully they can turn some things around. I wish you the best, and between the sticks, good luck with going back to school. And thank you so much for being here and talking with me today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's a pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you.
All right, cool. So anyone still watching the video, thanks for being here. This podcast will be out Thursday, May 2nd. And yeah, all right, there you go. Pete's dancing us out. So we'll see everybody.
Cheers.